In October 1879, Mallarmé's 8-year-old son Anatole died after several months of illness. The child dips in and out of the correspondence like a thread, now visible, now lost, along the father's letters to his friends and fellow poets between 1871 and 1879. At times alive and well, demanding, turbulent, both in and out of the womb, and at times sick, quiet, withdrawn, Anatole soon emerges as a regular figure in the recurring dramatis personae of his father's letters. These dramatis personae include the poet's wife Marie and his daughter Genevieve, but also, and here too we find characters whose coming into the world is fraught, painful, and triumphant, the likes of Hérodiade from the Faun, speaker subjects of two of Mallarmé's major works. Mallarmé's letters provide a great deal of information about the development of these poems, but tell us nothing of the 210 sheets of penciled notes towards a poem about the death of Anatole. These notes did not appear in Mallarmé's lifetime, and there are no references to a work in progress in his correspondence. When they were published in 1961 by Jean-Pierre Richard under the title Pour un tombeau d'Anatole, they revealed a side of Mallarmé thereto largely unknown, and which even now disturbs the idea of the poet of pristine impersonality and detachment. The text used for this translation is Bertrand Marchal's 1998 Pléiade edition of Volume 1 of Mallarmé's works, which provides a definitive text and a transcription of the notes, though which differs in part from Richard's transcription and interpretation. Mallarmé was an expert writer of tombeaux poems, and his great tombeaux for Edgar Allan Poe, Baudelaire, and Verlaine combine elegy with memorial, separating the poet's troubled biographies from the permanence of the work they left behind. These notes, however, provide the clearest indication of why this tombeau for Anatole could not be written. Caught between accepting as a poet the boy's death and resisting as a father the death of a son, Mallarmé finds two impulses, the paternal and the poetic, at odds with each other. The father mourns the life and fights the death, while the poet, complicit with illness and death, prepares to write the tombeau. For Anatole's tomb takes us to the center of these conflicting imperatives and shows how, when the two are ranged against each other, they make the poet's work suspect and taint the father's mourning. Mallarmé's mother had died when he was 7, and his sister Maria when he was 15. When Anatole died, the Mallarmés had to take out a family plot in Saint-Maurice cemetery. For Stéphane, seeing his son precede him into the grave was a dreadful reversal of the natural order, part of a protracted, transgenerational catastrophe. He had lost his mother, his siblings, and now his son. As he writes in the notes for Anatole's tombeau, did not know mother, and son did not know me. Image of me, other than me, carried off in death. Genevieve Mallarmé remembers her father once saying that it had been easier for Victor Hugo, since he could write about his daughter's death. He, however, could not. Hugo is fortunate to have been able to speak. For me, it is impossible. Mallarmé is a poet associated with silence, though rarely with the science of inscrutable grief. What strikes first of all about the notes for Anatole's tombeau is the effort of will expended in the intellectual and emotional search for a position from which to begin writing. The resulting notes constitute less something unfinished than something unbegun, but for all its fragmentation, For Anatole's Tomb is a powerful and coherent, and in many ways complete, reading experience. Its very brokenness may in the end mirror the thought behind this composition, thought which is at once in dialogue and in conflict with itself. For Anatole's Tomb confronts the things that stop poetry from being written, as Anatole's death puts up fierce resistance to being poeticized, even by a poet whose other tombeau poems are masterpieces of imagined resurrections, new lives, afterlives, and defiances of death. In the tombeau written for fellow poets, notably Poe, Baudelaire, Verlaine, and Gautier, Mallarmé attempted to reconfigure death as a transient, flickering moment of betweenness. As into himself at last eternity changes him, he had written of Poe, imagining the poet's death as a rite of passage on the way to becoming. But with Anatole it is different. He has been taken, too young to make his mark on the world, and too soon to become a poet and, as Mallarmé imagines, to continue father's work. Although one of the sheets reads, "Change of mode of being, that is all," For Anatole's Tomb remains incapable of making poetic sense of the boy's death. The poet who sought the Orphic explanation of the world expresses in these pages his fury against the formless. Mallarmé sought a reader with a mind open to multiple comprehension, and it is one of his many paradoxes that his poetry should promise, on the one hand, dazzling feats of abolition, and, on the other, a dazzling proliferation of meanings. To name an object is to eliminate 3/4 of a poem's pleasure. To suggest it, that is the dream, he famously wrote. And it is a dictum which has come to stand for many of the ambitions and achievements of French symbolism. Yet unlike many of his symbolist contemporaries, Mallarmé was not a poet of vagueness, of half-tones and pastel shades, like Verlaine, nor of the intermittently perceived, imprecisely expressed, like Maeterlinck, his theatre of silence he was among the first to call attention to. Mallarmé is not suggestive in these senses, but on the contrary relentlessly and unnervingly assertive. In any stanza of his poetry, or any paragraph of his prose, meanings are generated and juggled and cast aside, clauses and subclauses, themes and motifs are begun, only to be stretched and intercalated and spliced, all unfolding at different speeds and in different directions. It is the poetry of the undecidable, not poetry for the indecisive. With Mallarmé, the blank page, the page's native emptiness, is no neutral backdrop. This is most evident in his last great experimental poem, The Throw of the Dice Will Never Abolish Chance, where it teems with promise and energy, takes a share in the poem's meanings, but at the same time threatens the blankness of total cancellation. There are few Mallarmé poems that do not draw form from absence and negativity. The first word of the first poem of his Poésies, the ambiguous greeting come leave-taking salute, is rien, nothing. When W.S. Graham spoke of having to construct the silence first, to speak out on, or when Samuel Beckett asserted that it is better to write nothing than to not write at all, Mallarmé would have known what they meant. He knew that the act of composition must extend into the blankness that surrounds and threatens all acts of the mind, from which all such acts spring, and to which they all return. As he wrote in the preface to A Throw of the Dice, paper intervenes.